All right, so this is Todd Atkins, and I'm here with Miguel Iturrate, veteran matchmaker, and has over 15 years' experience in the sportsbook industry. And he also hosts the Lights Out podcast, LYTESOUT, Lights Out podcast, which you can find on YouTube. The best MMA history podcast there is out there. And I don't say that because he's on a show with me. It just is. If you go look, you'll see what I'm talking about. And today we're kind of gonna just do some specific stuff on James Krause with Miguel. The rest of the time we've done this, Mike Davis has been on the show with us, but gonna kind of let Miguel talk us through some of this. And I wanted to start out with, we know about the fight fixing allegations. Like everyone has talked about that part of it. So we know that's out there and that's something that can be looked at. And if proven true, obviously there would be trouble for Cross if that was proven true. But what else, from your experience in the sportsbook industry, what else could he have a problem with besides that?
That's the principal problem. That's the one that um the fight fixing is the one that's going to get him jail time. Everything else, I think, you lawyer up, you fight your way through it. You know, I think his gambling career is done. I think he's going to be marked as a person that the gambling industry doesn't want involved. The kind of thing like we reserve the right to let you in kind of thing. I think he'll be out. I think he's going to have a hard time staying with the UFC in terms of providing fighters for him and stuff like that. So I think that type of punishment is already started to happen to James Krause, and he's starting to feel it. Does he have some kind of repercussion? Ability to fight that? Maybe he's got the ability to sue people and get back in, as a trainer, so he can train fighters and stuff. But already he's suffering already on that. It is the faking of fights that'll get him jail time, and that's what I've been kind of falling back on all along here. And I think I was trying to place it as fraud in previous podcasts, and what it will be is it will be the conspiracy to produce a fake sporting event, and those are federal charges, and that's where he's going to be in trouble if Minner didn't go into that fight, trying to win.
But now, intent's hard to prove. So let's kind of look at the other things. Like, for example, if he was running his own sports book or if he had people underneath him, where would that fall given your experience?
Again, okay, so if you're running a sports book, you're going to have cash on hand to pay back, because as smart as you may think you are with odds, nobody hits 100%. So at some point you're going to be in a situation where you've got to pay back some people. So you have to have cash on hand and be ready to go. You have people under you taking bets and things, and you've got some semblance of this. Maybe he's putting the bets into another sports book and acting it and taking the bets. I don't know if they're also giving him money and saying, no, we'll bet whoever you say and you bet it. So it does get to be nefarious, a lot of questionable stuff there in that. But if he's running a sports book, keep in mind, a state, I believe it's at the state level, the state makes a decision if they're going to accept gambling or not within their borders. Some states don't accept it in no way, shape, or form. Other states, we've seen this change in our lifetime. Once they've done that, then there's a procedure for a casino to open. They don't just pop up. So they open, and this regulation body makes sure that the people can go there and gamble, and some will win, and that it's fair to everybody. Whatever the numbers mathematically are supposed to be, they are. When you go out of the country in the United States, you're going to get drastically worse odds at slot machines or even at table games and things in casinos overseas, because they don't have the same regulation we do in the States. So if he's started a sports book outside of the regulation, is gambling legal in Kansas where he lives? It starts as simple as that. So yeah, he could face some problems there, but I think it'll be a ban from being able to be in there, and he could face probation. He'd probably be able to avoid jail time there, especially if he can get the money back if the damages are limited to the sports books and things. But that's where his problem is going to be. Because let me give you an example. Let's say 5 years ago, there's a fighter who lost a fight in the UFC, and the sports books paid out, and they dropped $200,000 on that. In other words, they made a payment, and that fight wasn't conducted as a true sporting event, so they paid out. So now they have a minus $200,000 grievance. So what would they do? They would probably they would have a problem with the UFC because it's not a good event. So how those types of things, the UFC sort of guarantees that what we're watching is. So do the boxing commissions. They're supposed to be guaranteed that what we're watching is not fixed. So every one of these organizations has a grievance if that is what happens. So that is the number one problem, is I keep falling back to. Is it going to be hard to prove? Yes. Is there, in the Minner case, he's on the lower end of the pay scale. I've heard things like, he had a career-ending injury, otherwise, his career might be over. That whole thing, again, I completely understandable on a human level. And that's really the UFC's problem, because they have, literally hundreds of guys on the roster that fit that bill. But it doesn't allow you to go ahead and conspire to fake a fight. That's illegal. And if they've crossed that line, I think that part of it is that if they've crossed that line, there are people now that are being silent about it, because that's what has to happen now. You have to circle the wagons and say, no, we did nothing of that, and hope every time James and Minner discussed what they were going to discuss, that they did it, in a cornfield or at a loud bar with the where they can't be recorded with their phones in the car, or did they do it by text? Or did they do it by, did they do it by leaving voicemail? Hey, that thing, hey, the sportsbook is going to give us, so let's go ahead and fake that fight. Click, hey, James slipped up in a phone message, because all that stuff's going to be reviewed. And, if that gets proven, then he's going to do jail time. And it's because, when you start, here's the thing is, again, the gambling industry is an industry that's decades and decades old, generations of it. The Fertittas are not the first generation that owned these casinos. Their parents and grandparents did. The internet is what's new here. These guys used to do this with notebooks and bookies, and exactly like Krausman allegedly have been doing, is have a kid, have a couple of guys that do the run for you. They run for you here. It's like, oh, shoot, I owe this guy $5,000. Here's the $5,000. Take him an envelope, slip it to him, but make sure he gets paid. It's always about your word and whether you get paid or not. That's how you keep those customers. That's how you mass up 2,000 customers, is you're probably taking care of some of them. And everybody said, yeah, this is worth paying for because I'll make more money on my bet. So he's got a deal where he controlled and told a lot of people, so he controlled more money than he was worth, And that's a problem in the gambling industry too, because a lot of it is who you know. And if you want to make a big bet, there are ways to do that. I guarantee you, in 1993, when the UFC started, if you were a high roller and wanted to make $1 million bet that Royce Gracie would win that, you would call your casino, or you would be, if you're a high roller, you might be a VIP at several casinos, and you would feel out who your contact is, and they would investigate and be like, all right, and one of them would take his bet. That's how high rollers work. So he knows more about this. He knew Gracie and he knew this. Now he's got to find a casino who will take his bet. But I think that some of them would at least they all are prepared to have that conversation with their high rollers. That's how they take care of people. So Krause is a wannabe high roller, and nobody likes that. Not the high rollers, not the the people who are meant to be dealing with them, and all that stuff. And all that leads to further scrutiny. So now he's got to be sure that he doesn't have a fighter that is going to bring bad on him if he's done anything. He's got to make sure that every fighter is going to tell the truth if he hasn't done anything. No one's going to make something up. Does he have any other phone numbers that the authorities aren't aware of that might be revealed here? Like a fighter from 5 years ago saying, "Oh man, I used to reach him at this number," and that opens up another number. All those texts, all those things, all have to be reviewed. And again, is he smart enough? No one. I'm not saying he's dumb, but I'm saying at some point you can think you're too smart. Did you have every conversation on this? Ask yourself, if they're faking a fight, where did they do it? Did they have every conversation in the gym? That might be okay. Did they have it on the phone? Did they have it in text? Did they have it in person? Every single mention or conversation. The circumstantial evidence is there in that the fight, looks like less than a full athletic contest. And that's, that's working against him as well. They didn't do a good job faking it.
Now, in your opinion, if he's not caught on that, is there anything else that would send him in jail?
Like you said, if he feels like he was acting as a sports book. Now, if he's a guy that recommends bets and he manages like an account, like he thinks he's an account manager for people, like he's managing their accounts and stuff, and returning bets to him, hey, that's a lot of paperwork. That's a lot of P's and Q's to do. If he was pooling people's money so he can make bigger bets and then figuring it out, at some point, if he was acting enough like a gambling entity, like a sports book, like taking bets and things like that for people, and was he taking a risk of paying out or not? He could be. He's not subject. Whatever he was doing, if it's close enough to what the sports books do, he could be facing a lot of fines and stuff like that for operating an illegal sports book, for operating an illegal gambling entity of some type that's not subject to the regulations that the casinos are. So yeah, and again, it starts. I don't even know. I can look it up while we talk. But is gambling legal in Kansas? So he can do it on the internet. But now you're talking about. You said you had guys and running around, and I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like in Oklahoma, you can't do this kind of gambling. You can't place wagers on sports. You can go to Indian casinos and play blackjack and do slots or whatever, but there's no anything outside of the Indian casinos is illegal.
Yeah, and I think Kansas is similar because the casinos there may be on Indian territory. So I don't know, maybe he's got an agreement with somebody in the Indian territories who will take his bets. That's the thing is if you want to make a bet, you got to have somebody who has the opposite need and somebody who's covering, the money. So it's not just about we're going to take bets and stuff like that. You have to have the money, and there's got to be somebody who thinks the opposite of you. So if you can get any house to take the bet, if not, if James is acting as the house, then he's in quasi legal territory as far as I understand. But he's not subject to gambling regulation or anything like that. And I think I think he could do some heavy fines and lifetime bans from the sport, but I don't think it's jail time until the conspiracy kicks in. I think that's how this will play out.
Now let's talk about what he did admit to. Let's talk first about the Discord. Let's kind of break this down. Having this Discord of, 2,000 to 5,000 people, $50 to $2,000 a month, and him posting the plays and taking over people's accounts and betting for him. So that's pretty much what he talked about there. As your experience, like I said, working with Sportsbook as long as you did, what do you make of all that?
All right, so I talk me through this. So this Discord is a membership. So somebody comes in and they say, okay, look, you're going to be a member. I put in $50 or $50 a month, and somebody else comes in and they're putting in $2,000 a month. But whatever that is, whatever you're inputting into there, James takes the pool of money, gambles it, and then the payouts are divided accordingly. So if you bet $5, you get $8 back. If you bet $2,000, you get your appropriate back. If he's doing all that and sitting with a calculator, but taking all the money and pooling it to make bets, yeah, he's going to be fined and shut down and possibly jail time. But I think he escapes jail time. But I think you'll be shut down. You'll never be able to do anything in the gambling industry again.
I would think the $2,000 a month people were getting him to play for him, if I had to guess.
Yeah,
The
I think
$50 a month were just getting his plays.
Oh, it could be. So is that a membership? I pay $550 a month. I get something from him, and then if I pay $2,000 a month, there's more, more benefits to it. It's like, is that the way it was? Okay,
Yes.
so he's not pooling the money. Then yeah, what is he doing with the $2,000 people? And how many did he have and stuff like that? Like I said, if he's taking their money and pooling them and saying, look, we're all going to bet this fight, then again, let's say it's 30 people, 2,000 a month. Now he's got $60,000 to bet.
It was more like 2,000 people or more.
But figure that other 2,000 people.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Most of them are $50, right? Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the big guys, the $2,000 guys. Let's say there's only 30 of them, and he gets $60,000 in bets that he's going to make. You can't really do that as sportsbook. You can't do that on one of the online sportsbook without, a relationship. So what he's probably doing is he's got 15 accounts open at 15 sportsbooks, and he's dividing it up and putting the same bet at each one. That hides this kind of activity to a certain extent, because if there's not a lot of action there and it's just limited, then each book has got the bet out there. They're expecting to get some, but each one of those bets has a limit. So let's say they're used to it. It's a UFC. It's on pay-per-view. They know they average about this amount of bets. So once they go over a threshold, it sets off a flag. So a prop bet, like if there's going to be a finish in the first round, they know that's a low number. Very few people bet that. Very little money comes in on that compared to, the win-loss or anything else. So when that goes over a threshold, alarms go up quick. And that's why dividing it up among the sportsbook kept him hidden for a long time, probably. But again, here he became a little bit of an entity, a little bit of a celebrity. And again, just that act of taking money and other people's money and dividing it up a sportsbook is against the sport. When you sign up for an account, the sportsbook tells you cannot do that. And you say, yes, I won't do it. Give me an account. So just based on that, the sportsbook, he's done. And again, I don't know how much more enforcement they have beyond that. But, if it's cost someone money, he could be facing charges there. But I don't see that as that big a deal until you come to conspiracy to throw a sporting event.
Now, he also said he posts some of the losses on some of the accounts. What does that mean?
Post some of the losses on some of the accounts.
Does that mean he pays if his pick loses, or is that what that means?
Yeah, look, at that point, if he's acting as a house in some way, then he's not a casino. So then, yeah, that's the kind of thing that will get you, that'll get you the kind of charges where you're not allowed to have access to a cell phone or internet or, anything that'll let you near gambling anything, and you're not allowed with. So I don't know exactly the intricacies of what he was doing, but it sounds very complicated, like he complicated things. And it sounds like the investigators are going to have a lot to look at. And if he's not guilty of conspiracy, but they find other things like this, like, a sportsbook style entity working illegally in Kansas, he could maybe somebody throws some charges at him. He's getting so much undue attention at this point that's hard to say, well, he's going to get more. But yeah, this can only continue to snake out of control for him. And the entire gambling industry wants him to go down and end this. It can't go further than that, They can't have an entity say, wow, I wonder if there are any other coaches that have had their fighters ever go into a fight and lose it.
Now, I want to talk about I think some people covering this, they see the FBI is investigating this, or they see that they've taken control of devices and stuff. This is all standard, stuff pretty much when you have an investigation. Explain why the FBI gets involved in something like this in the first place, and why taking control of like devices or computers is not unusual at all.
in this situation, he's in Kansas. He may be placing bets in other states, and just that would bring the FBI's involvement in because of the crossing of state lines and it being, more than one state being involved. So no, it's not unusual that they're involved. Usually, like when you hear FBI, you think, oh, it's really bad. It's getting more grave. But I don't think that once you're getting into the federal problems, because you can't fake a sporting event anywhere. Keep in mind, you could be in any state that you could have a state where gambling is absolutely not allowed on anything, and have a fight there and fake that fight. And all the gambling in every other state will still be subject to the fact that they took bets on a fake fight. So, that's once you've conspired to fake a fight, it becomes a federal problem. And by that I mean, keep in mind, faking horse races, faking baseball games, faking, the guy who faked the 1918 World Series went to jail. The players didn't. The guy who dropped the money didn't. But the big guy setting up the event, conspiring to fix the World Series, did go to jail. And that's what will happen to James Krause if he's the mastermind planner. This is what's interesting. Is it limited to Minner? Is Minner the only instance? Or like I said, when you're a DUI person, you're probably driving drunk before your first DUI. So here they got caught. I wonder, he's done it with other fighters under certain circumstances. And that's all for the investigators to try to dig up. But I think that they're all valid questions. And I think a lot of those questions come up because, Krause conducted himself a little bit like he didn't see the danger coming. He had people's attention before he saw the danger coming, and he didn't tighten his ship up and quiet himself soon enough. He was out there, talking to Ariel Helwani about what was going on. Like, a few of those things are avoided. We don't hear any of this. So it's a very interesting.
I lost you for a moment.
Yeah, there we go. All right, there, I'm back.
Okay. Yeah. But what I mean is people think, oh, since the FBI is investigating this is a big deal. There's no other way it could have happened. Like you said, once the bets are made around the United States or elsewhere, it had to be done by them.
No, yeah, right? Yes. They're the right entity to investigate a federal offense of this nature. Like I said, if the gambling, you bet in Nevada on a fight that's in Utah, and Utah doesn't have betting, you fake the fight in Utah. Yeah, that's conspiracy in Utah. You know what I mean? To fake the fight, and nothing to do with the gambling aspect of it at all. So,
but it doesn't necessarily have to be faked, right? It could just be that they're investigating the whole gambling issue itself. The FBI is the ones that have to do this. Yes.
I think within the state, the states have regulatory bodies first. So like in New Jersey, if everything's in-house in New Jersey or there's a problem there,
right,
that they will go ahead and handle it with there'll be something called like a state gaming and control board or something like that.
Right, but when you have like 2,000 people and they're not all in the same location, they could all be in different states. The FBI has to do it, correct?
It is, yes. Yeah.
So people that are saying, oh, well, the FBI is involved, this must be serious. They're not.
Yeah,
it's not really an accurate way to look at it.
Yeah, the FBI, their reputation isn't what it once was or whatever, but yeah, they're the federal authority that does this. And, again, you're not getting the guys trailing, it's like they're not taking guys off the serial murder cases to put them on this. There are guys who's, applied for an FBI job and got put into the white collar crime area, and that's what this qualifies as.
Now, the other thing I want to ask you is, like the taking of devices and phones and computers. This is all standard stuff that the FBI would do when they're investigating something like this.
Yeah, I even go so far as to think some of it is a little bit of a sending of a message, because a lot of that stuff could be done remotely now. You You might not even know the FBI went through your PC. You know what I mean? It really isn't that hard in the modern era. But I still think that they have traditional way. Like I said, it's the internet that's intrusive here, because this gambling type of atmosphere has been going on for decades and decades and decades. It has to do with word of mouth and the value of your word is your law. Do you honor that and pay people and do all that? So they've been investigating wiretapping people and looking for notebooks and things like that for years, decades. There's a department for this in the FBI.
Now, I do want to ask you something that you had mentioned before, and that was James doing the interview with the Ariel Helwani. In that situation, like if you were in that situation, you're Kraus, Helwani interviews you. Do you feel like he was kind of pushing him down a road to get him to say certain things, or what do you think? Because I feel like he kind of, in a way, kind of set him up a little bit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that interview is very critical because I think it's the one that started all this. And Helwani's a guy that, as a journalist, people have varied opinions on him. He's been around for a long time, but is he a true journalist? There's so many opinions and so many. Dana hates him, so that makes a lot. He has other people that poo-poo everything he does. He may have been a little catty, a little, reaching a little bit in the interview, but I don't think he did anything wrong into what he. I think the guy who made a mistake there was Kraus by saying too much. I think another guy takes that in there and goes, oh, doesn't even the gambling and all that stuff doesn't even come up. And the UFC, for having him on their Fight Pass and stuff like that, you can see why his guard was down. He felt like what he was doing was not reproachable, but all it took was enough attention for it to come. So yeah, I don't blame Helwani. I think James made a mistake saying too much, and he's reaping what he sowed.
And now, as we're winding this down, we were talking a little bit off record about Patty the Batty and Ariel Helwani as far as this paid interview thing goes. Now, you do interviews on Lights Out Podcast. I do some interviews on my show as well. Let's talk about paid versus not paid for interviews and kind of where you stand on the whole, your experience with it and where you kind of stand on it.
In this case, I wonder if Ariel Helwani is being genuine when he says no one's ever asked him for pay for an interview, because I believe that that's something. Again, this is internet only. This is something in the last 10 years, because what happens now is, so somebody worked for a newspaper or even ESPN or a website, back before YouTube monetization and stuff like that. Even a news website, if they were worth it, you'd look at it. It's like if they were a small mom pa site, you might not do the interview. But if you were going to get a SureDog interview, you'd sure do it because of the exposure. And Helwani is a guy that provides a certain amount of exposure. Now, YouTube comes up, he starts a channel, and he starts making money as well for that. Now, is that fair or not? I don't know. It's a modern problem. You know what I mean? There are fighters that nowadays, I believe, have started to ask for money for interviews, for certain interviews. Sometimes it's also, you never know, it's case by case. Sometimes it may be a mechanism that they just don't want to do it. Pay me, or give me $20 for an autograph because they don't want to do the autograph. You know what I mean? So, Patty the Batty, the guy's, probably one of the top 5 hottest names in the sport right now. So his manager's getting him paid for interviews. Probably the people paying for those interviews, if you add up the hits, they won't add up to Ariel Helwani's. But Patty doesn't need the exposure. So Patty's in a unique situation. A lot of fighters would die to get on Helwani just for the exposure. And this is the other part, though, is that Helwani's, he's making money off his site or whatever, and maybe people get resentful or whatever, but, his star is not as shiny as it once was. He was, once one of the main reporters and stuff on the sport and considered, I remember when he came up circa 2006, 2007, the young Canadian kid looking for interviews in the Bodog campuses. And, he stayed with it from there. So he's been in there 15 years. He's paid his dues, done his work, but he's not the power in journalism that he once was in this sport. And a lot of that has to do with, I think what Patty also was doing there to a certain extent is that there's a bear in the room. And that bear is Dana White. He's trying to impress his boss by pissing on Helwani because if you watch the whole video, you see Dana's, Dana looks extremely happy with what Patty said. And, Patty scored major brownie points with his boss there. I don't think that anybody's sort of mentioned that, and that shouldn't be escaped. You know what I mean? It's like, it was good for Patty to say that in front of Dana. Trust me.
Now tell the story about when you first saw Ariel Helwani at Bodog. Now, what was you were one of the founders of Bodog Fight, correct?
I was their first matchmaker. I was there when we went from Euphoria FC to Bodog when the deal was signed. So, yeah, we were, we did about a year and a half worth of international big shows. And Helwani I'm pretty sure he's from Canada, Toronto or something like that. We're in Vancouver, but he showed up at the offices and, was looking to do interviews, young and he stayed with it. So he got there, but that's what I remember. I avoided. I don't remember if I did an interview with him or not, but at that point I was nearing the end of my career and he was starting his. So it wasn't a match. I was at the point where I didn't want to do interviews, Now Helwani, fast forward 10 years later, if I had been in that spot, I probably would have had to do the interview because Helwani had made himself into one of the premier journalists of the sport. And it was worth your time to get your word out there, to get your opinion out there. Even if he didn't pay you, it was worth it because so many people would see it. But I believe Helwani's star is less shiny, less people see it. And he's still kind of acting as if he's as important as he was back in the day. And, that's a little disrespectful on his part and a little bit, and he gets a little bit like, hey, please, So I can see why he has ups and downs and fans and non-fans. But I don't think he, in the James Krause thing, I don't think he was out of line. And here, I think what we saw there was it could even be conspiracy theory time, and that they planned it so that both names get put out there. Patty sucking up to the boss. Anytime Patty gets 1 million views, if you put Patty and Dana White in the clip together, you got 2 million.
That's a good point. Maybe it was all done, to help everybody.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're talking about this kind of non-subject. I didn't even want to talk about it, if you remember, because it's like,
right.
But there is a lot of repercussions over it. I don't think many fighters will ever be in a position like Patty where they can say, nah, I don't want to do interviews. I'm good. Like some of them may not want to do it because they don't like to speak in public, or, he stutters and is embarrassed, or, he just doesn't give a F. You know what I mean? There are a million reasons why you don't want to do an interview. Doing it from a position of power like that, like you can pick and choose your interviews. You don't want to do them, you don't do them. But to turn down Helwani's interview is something most fighters wouldn't do because they'll do it because of the exposure. So Patty's breaking through and going up there. But rather than, it's interesting, it's great. So it's like, I wonder what Patty's making, because the bottom line is the UFC is going to have to pay him at some point, especially if things continue. But what is he really making at this point? Because, what's he getting for an interview? It also seems a little bit beneath UFC fighters that, hey, they're trying to grab a couple $100 on the side for an interview. But there does seem to be that type of person. This touches back on the Krause and Minter thing. The UFC's pay scale has this entire, biosphere of fighting effed up, So you're telling me Patty the Batty, top 5 hottest names on the UFC, he's still so low on the pay scale that he will say, yeah, I'll take $300 for an interview. I'm going to turn down ones that don't give me it because, hey, I need, I got the income and stuff. McGregor doesn't do that. McGregor turns it down because he don't want to do it because he has enough money. Patty doesn't have the money yet. And it's his employer who should be paying him, not the journalists, in order to get interviews. So this does tie in a nice and interesting way to the Krause thing. Is like the root source of these types of commotions is that the UFC is vehemently trying to maintain the pay scale that they have now, at all costs. And it really does seem to be broken, especially on the entry level, unless you get to the upper echelons. But there are many examples of it, and hundreds of examples in the history in the past that the pay scale isn't proper yet. And I think that Patty's a perfect example of it. If Patty the Batty really has to get, what's he getting for an interview? Like, what are these websites paying? Like, are they paying $5,000 for an interview, or is it a few $100 to sit down for an hour? And does Patty really need $200-$300 for an interview? Is he like pocketing that money? Is his manager saying, "Hey, you got $300 for that interview? Where's my $60? You gotta send me $60 for his." I mean, it really gets that really should be beneath them too. That's what they don't notice. And Dana White laughing atop of the whole thing and encouraging it is just him pocketing more money on his end, and everybody else just is at fighting each other and stuff. He's really playing the puppet master really well. The Dana always does, But yeah, that's what it is to me. It's like they really need money for interviews. It sounds like you're still poor, Patty.
I want to ask you one other thing Ariel mentioned was he doesn't get paid more no matter who he interviews or how many hits it gets. He says he gets a salary or whatever, but his salary is based off of who he can get interviews with. You know what I mean? Do you agree?
I don't know what his company structure is. Like if he's got a sponsor and the sponsor puts the videos out and they say, look, Ariel, here's $10,000 a month and you get that no matter what, then it doesn't matter to him. But
right. But if he was only getting interviews with you and me, he probably wouldn't get the 10,000 a month or whatever he's getting.
No, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And there's a maintenance to that has to go on, because what happens is, so in that scenario, Patty comes on, he has an interview that makes, 2 million interviews, 2 million hits, and he monetizes it and gets an extra $5,000 check from YouTube for that month. If he doesn't keep it, if a sponsor or a corporate entity keeps it there, it doesn't take away from what Patty's pointing out, that at some point, but I think what Patty missed here is that a true, heroic, like UFC fighter to the masses shouldn't be stooping so low as to grab a couple $100 for interviews either.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, I guess I could see both sides, but yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we've seen it in the old days before the internet. We've seen the guys, hey, I went up to, Marvin Hagler and he did me an autograph for free. Ran into him a couple of years later. He asked me for $20 on the street for an autograph. Why did he do that? Maybe he just didn't want to do it. Or maybe he needed the $20 and we would have pocketed $20 for the autograph. But that type of thing of trying to monetize for things, that they used to give away is a sign that the fighter's rising. But again, like if the pay scale doesn't come along either, Patty's got to grab $300 for an interview. I just think it looks low. I think if I was Dana, the whole thing reeks of. Remember when Adrian Broner was supposed to be the next Floyd Mayweather? Meanwhile, Floyd Mayweather's over here, making $1 million bets on sporting events, and Adrian Broner's getting arrested making $10,000, $12,000 bets in a bowling alley. It's a totally B-class thing. And Patty asking for interviews to me really is a totally B-class thing, which is my opinion.
Yeah, and you have that and I don't know if you get this in Costa Rica, but here in the US you have these traveling what do you call them? Like conventions.
Okay.
Of different things where guys are selling their autographs. So it seems like that's the way of the world now. whether it
Yeah,
be a wrestling convention or an MMA convention. And all they're doing, all it is a bunch of people selling their autograph pretty much and doing some conversations here and there.
right, right. And I mean, I've been stopped by athletes, or I've stopped an athlete, and I've been asked for $20 for the autograph, and I took it to mean that you don't want to mess with it, you know. So again, these guys, again, I'm not saying Patty needs to be paid more. I think at this point he'll agree with me. The UFC is using him to the point where whatever he's making, he's not making enough from those paychecks. Dana's going to laugh and hand him a couple of checks on the side. You add all that up, and it's still probably not correct. And it's just my opinion. But at the end of the day, when non-fighters are the people who are making the most money off of the sport for the last 15 years, 20 years, there's something sort of that needs to be fixed.
I think that's a good thing to end on. And Miguel, I appreciate you taking time to discuss this. And again, this is Todd Atkins with Miguel Iturrate from the Lights Out podcast. Be sure to check out their YouTube channel, which is LYTES, like Chris Lytle, LYTES out, Lights Out podcast.
Yeah,
And
Lytle pops in with us every once in a while. We got the MMA detective. We'll be back. Thanks. If you're coming this far, thank you for listening. I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but in this particular case, I think you'll see it play out that way. The conspiracy is the biggest thing, and if that can be proven, they're going to try to. And if that can be proven, that'll be the source of his problems. Everything else, then it'll just become a blip,
All right, Miguel, it was great talking to you again. Until the next time, everybody, take care.
Thanks, Todd.